Welcome everybody who's in the live audience this afternoon, and greetings to everyone who's watching this online later. Today's talk is about Philippine coins. It's about World War II, and it's about family. I have a strong personal connection to the Philippines. Half of my family is Filipino. I was fortunate to marry into an amazing Filipino family, and I've been honored to learn the culture and history firsthand, and to help teach that culture and history to our daughter, who's 9 years old this year. She will proudly tell you, I'm half American and half Filipino. My grandfather-in-law was Dr. Teofilo Reno Rojas. He was a 1929 graduate of the University of the Philippines Medical School. By the early 1940s, he was married with children, including a little girl who would grow up to be Dr. Erlinda Rojas Santos, my mother-in-law. He was an officer of the Philippine Constabulary and had a successful private practice as a dental surgeon. While my grandfather-in-law was building his career and raising his family, World War II was raging in Europe, and the Allies increasingly saw Imperial Japan as a growing threat. In May 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt declared a state of emergency in the United States and its overseas possessions, which included the Philippines. He created a new centralized high command for Asia, headquartered in Manila under General Douglas MacArthur. On July 26, 1941, this was the summer before Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt called upon Filipinos to mobilize within the United States Army Forces in the Far East, or USAFFE. Here we see General MacArthur on August 15, 1941, as the Philippine Army Air Corps was inducted in a ceremony at Camp Murphy, Rizal. And a photo of Philippine scouts being trained on a 37mm M3 anti-tank gun at Fort William McKinley. All of the organized military forces of the Philippines were called to defend the United States against Japanese aggression in the Pacific. This included the Philippine Scouts, the Philippine Commonwealth Army, the Army Air Corps, and the Philippine Constabulary. Later, after the fall of Bataan and Corregidor, it also included recognized guerrilla units. Filipinos living in the mainland United States also rallied to the cause, as we see here. My grandfather-in-law answered President Roosevelt's call and joined the Army Medical Corps. Meanwhile, on my father's side of the family, my dad was in grade school in the 1940s. But my uncles, his brothers, were old enough to enlist, and they joined the U.S. Army and Navy. This is my Uncle Jimmy. Years later, we would have memorial bricks installed for them at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. You can see their bricks here: Burdett Tucker, James Tucker, and Marshall Tucker. To their right, Teofilo Rojas. World War II was a hugely significant event, of course, a global event, and we feel its influence in the United States today, 80 plus years later. In the Philippines, echoes of the war are even louder. Reminders are everywhere. I'll show you an example. Last summer, we spent a few days at a hotel in Pico de Loro Cove in Batangas. The hotel's beach is beautiful and relaxing. On the beach, a big Japanese multi-purpose gun is aimed out toward the sea. It's a relic of wartime coastal defense. It's startling to see this destructive military apparatus surrounded by such natural beauty. There's my daughter next to it. Stepping back again into the 1940s. The December 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war. After that, about 2 million Americans served in the Pacific Theater. The original 20,000 or so in the USA FFE were joined by 260,000 Filipinos serving under American command. The heroic actions of American and Filipino forces during World War II are well documented. This action included the initial defense of the islands, guerrilla resistance during the Japanese occupation, which started right after Pearl Harbor, and the hard-won liberation in 1944 and 1945. Ultimately, more than 1 million American troops were involved in freeing the islands from Japanese control, the largest campaign of the Pacific Theater. The liberation was largely accomplished by the spring of 1945, though Japan continued to fight in pockets until the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the war, American soldiers returned home, and souvenirs of the Philippines started making their way to the United States. Among those mementos were curious bronze and silver coins that have Filipino symbols on them and the Spanish name of the islands, Filipinas, but also the words United States of America. This can be confusing to people who find the coins in Grandpa's old cigar box if they don't know the historical connection between the United States and the Philippines. That connection goes back to the 1890s, when the United States defeated Spain in the Spanish-American War. The war ended in 1898, and the United States Senate confirmed the peace terms in 1899. Although the conflict was mainly over Cuba and strengthening American influence in the Western Hemisphere, other outcomes of America's victory had profound impact on the other side of the world, in Asia. Spain gave up the island of Guam, and the United States was allowed to purchase another Spanish colony, the Philippines, for $20 million. This political cartoon from 1898 shows how many Americans viewed the Philippines at the time. We see Uncle Sam rescuing a damsel in distress from 2 predators. The tiger is Spain. The smaller, but still very dangerous, wolf is labeled as Aguinaldoism. Emilio Aguinaldo was a Filipino leader who wanted independence from both Spain and the United States. Like many Filipinos, he didn't want to simply switch imperial masters from Madrid to Washington, D.C. An insurgency had been growing against Spain for some time, and that drive for independence continued after the United States took over. By 1902, the U.S. Army suppressed the independence movement, and the island's military government was replaced by a civilian administration led by an American judge, William Howard Taft. One of the first nation-building goals of the new territorial government was to develop a coinage for local use that was similar to the old Spanish monetary system, but reflected American sovereignty. The new coins were designed by one of the great Filipino artists. His name was Melecio Figueroa, and he was a celebrated silversmith, sculptor, engraver, and art professor. Figueroa had studied in Europe and won international art prizes. He had earned private and government scholarships and pensions in the arts. In 1893, he was named Grabador Primero, or first engraver of the Casa Moneda, the Spanish Royal Mint in Manila. To give some historical context, at that time, the chief engraver of the United States Mint was Charles Barber, and the president was Grover Cleveland. After the Spanish-American War in 1899, Figueroa served as a delegate to the legislature of what Emilio Aguinaldo wanted to be an independent new Philippine Republic. Figueroa was one of the signers of that republic's constitution. This was shortly after the U.S. defeated Spain, but before America formalized its military and civil government over the islands. The United States ended up affirming its control of the Philippines, and Figueroa continued his work as an artist. He entered and won the competition to design the Philippines' new coins. The coins were introduced in 1903. Melecio Figueroa could easily monopolize any lecture about Philippine coins. Historian Gerard Vasily Clavicius points out that Figueroa was a bona fide celebrity in his time, the likes of Rizal and Bonifacio and other national heroes. As a medallic sculptor, he calls Figueroa the Philippine Pisanello and compares him to Augustus St. Gaudens. He notes that Figueroa's Filipino Liberty, whom we'll study in a moment, predates by several years St. Gaudens' Liberty on the $20 gold piece. And he calls her, quote, America's first academically beautiful and anatomically accurate depiction of Lady Liberty in American coinage. I'll just add two more points. Two injustices of history. The first injustice, Figueroa died of tuberculosis on July 30, 1903. This was just a few weeks after his coins were introduced into circulation. He deserved to see his coins enter wide circulation and become as popular as they quickly did, but he didn't live long enough to have that pleasure. The second injustice is one we can have some influence over. In addition to being a Philippine national hero, Melecio Figueroa is an unsung hero of American numismatics. His portrait is part of the Filipino National Fine Arts Collection and hangs in the National Museum of the Philippines in Manila, but most American coin collectors don't know his name. In my opinion, he deserves to be at least as famous as Chief Engraver Charles Barber. His coin designs were minted into the 1960s, about 40 years longer than Barber's were. The new currency was exchangeable at the rate of 2 Philippine pesos to a US dollar. 100 centavos equaled 1 peso, which was a roughly dollar-sized coin minted in silver. Other denominations included silver 50, 20, and 10 centavos, and a copper nickel 5 centavos. The smallest coins were made of bronze, the centavo and half centavo. Let's look closely at the 1903 coins. On the silver coinage, we see a female personification of the Philippines. She's not the frightened damsel in distress we saw in that 1898 political cartoon. Instead, she's active, robust, independent, with flowing hair and a sense of purpose. She stands firmly on her own 2 feet. In one hand, she holds a hammer against an anvil. Whether she's picking it up or setting it down, we don't know. But the implication is that hard work has been done and will continue to be done. In her other hand, she carries an olive branch, the ancient symbol of peace. This is an encouraging bit of symbolism for a new civilian government emerging from war and looking forward to American-style stability. In the background is the famous volcano, Mount Mayon, a landmark southeast of Manila. We can see the volcano is active by its smoke billowing to the east. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the damsel in distress and this new, energetic, standing liberty style Philippines. Coin designer Melecio Figueroa was not perpetuating a weak and helpless image of his native land. On the bronze and copper nickel coins, we see a strong young Filipino man. He's bare-chested and muscular, resting next to an anvil with a hammer, looking toward Mount Mayon and the plume of smoke coming from the volcano. As with the silver coin design, there's an implication of honest, productive work having been done, with the promise of more to follow. The Filipino youth sees an active, fiery volcano in the near distance. And as forces of nature go, a volcano is more awesome, terrifying, and unstoppable than anything man can create. But, like the lady on the silver coins, the Filipino laborer is not afraid. Compare the coins depiction of the Philippines with this Puck magazine cover illustration from December 1902. Here the islands are symbolized by an unhappy child. Why is he unhappy? Because Santa Claus has a bag full of toys and dolls and musical instruments. But his first Christmas present is a bundle of books, marked education, with a note saying, Uncle Sam to the Filipino. Ostensibly, the joke of the cartoon is in the caption, with Santa sweating and saying, I'm glad to oblige Uncle Sam, of course, but next time I come, I'll wear khaki. That's the joke. But the underlying message is that the Filipino people are children who need some book learning before they earn the riches that come from Western civilization. The symbolism of Filipinos as children or savages was common in the 1890s and early 1900s. Then along comes Melecio Figueroa and his innovative coin designs. Here's the coinage youth, side by side with that naughty child version of the Philippines. He still has a primitive aesthetic, if you will, with his uncovered chest and legs, but he's not a petulant boy. He's strong and productive and full of potential. Again, Figueroa has thrown aside the imperialists' view of the Philippines and replaced it with symbols of quiet strength and pride. Here are some words of praise about the Filipino coinage from Secretary of War Elihu Root in his 1903 report to President Theodore Roosevelt, both in the artistic quality of the designs and in perfection of workmanship. They compare favorably with anything of the kind ever done in America. Roosevelt in the following years would pursue and achieve his personal goal of bringing greatness to American coinage. His opinion of the nation's circulating coins in the early 1900s is well known and not complimentary. We see a typical quote here. He called them artistically of atrocious hideousness. Let's compare the 1903 Philippine coins to standard U.S. coins that were being minted at the time. This is the Philippine centavo and the Indian head cent, designed a couple generations earlier by James Barton Longacre. You'll notice that if the obverses of the new Filipino coins were artistic, the reverses were more utilitarian. They show a U.S. federal shield surmounted by an eagle. This is standard fare in many American coins. The eagle is the national bird and a convenient symbol for coinage. In fact, its presence on American coinage was required by law. The Philippines eagle holds an olive branch in its right talon, symbolizing peace, and a bundle of arrows in its left, symbolizing readiness for battle or self-defense. The reverse identifies the coin as a production of the United States of America in bold lettering along the top. This is the Philippine 5 centavo and the Liberty Head nickel designed by Charles Barber. Barber's design of Miss Liberty in profile is popular with collectors today. In 1903, it had been in circulation for 20 years, and it would continue for another 10. Charles Barber's dime is roughly analogous to the Philippine 10 centavos, although its legal tender value was twice that of the Philippine coin. The somewhat masculine profile of Miss Liberty was used on the dime, quarter, and half dollar. Today, these are all very popular series for collectors, but in their time, the design was considered plain. The Barber quarter and half dollar have similar obverse and reverse designs with a heraldic eagle that's somewhat similar to the Philippine coins. The U.S. silver dollar, designed by George T. Morgan, is a very popular collectible today. In the early 1900s, it was a commodity, minted in quantities much larger than needed for commerce. Millions of them went from the mint press straight into Treasury vaults. The denomination was suspended after 1904 and wouldn't be minted again until 1921. A question for you. Which is prettier or more impressive, Figueroa's peso or Morgan's dollar? That's a personal decision for each observer and each collector to make. Other American coin designs, some of today's most popular, would become contemporaries of Philippine coinage starting in 1909 through the 1940s. They include the Lincoln cent, the Buffalo nickel, the Jefferson nickel, the Mercury dime, the Standing Liberty quarter, the Washington quarter, the Liberty walking half dollar, and the peace dollar. The dies for minting the Philippine coins were made at the Philadelphia Mint by the chief engraver Charles Barber. From 1903 to 1908, many of the coins were struck in Philadelphia and, per tradition, these bear no mint mark. Those minted in San Francisco have a tiny S mint mark. From 1909 through 1919, the coins were only struck in San Francisco. And early in 1920, some 1 centavo coins were made in San Francisco, but later that year, a new mint, which had been approved and budgeted by the Philippine legislature, was opened and started operations. From July 1920 up to 1941, this Mint of the Philippine Islands, as it was called, made all the coins for the territory, and it was located in Manila. You'll often hear it referred to as the Manila Mint. A change in government brought some changes to the coinage. Almost from the start of American sovereignty, the goal was for the Philippines to be built up and take over its own governance. In 1934, the Philippine Independence Act set up a timetable to end America's colonial rule by 1946. In 1935, the colony became a commonwealth, a form of organized but unincorporated dependent territory, largely self-governed except for defense and foreign policy. The United States maintained sovereignty and reserved the right to mobilize Filipinos into military service, but the Commonwealth adopted its own constitution, and its self-government could not be withdrawn by the U.S. Congress. Manuel Quezon was president of the Philippines in 1936. Coinage of the Commonwealth began that year with a celebratory set of 3 commemorative coins, 2 50 centavos and 1 peso. Each featured a portrait of Quezon with either President Franklin Roosevelt or the last American Governor General, Frank Murphy. For day-to-day commerce, the Commonwealth's circulating coins were minted in Manila from 1937 to 1941. The reverse design was changed from the U.S. federal shield to a shield derived from the official seal of the new government. 3 stars symbolize the island's 3 main geographical regions: Luzon, Mindanao, and the Visayas. The central oval design is based on the colonial coat of arms of the city of Manila. On the coin at right, you can see a tiny M mint mark for Manila. After the Japanese invasion in 1941 and occupation starting in 1942, the Commonwealth administration was forced to govern in exile. The mint of the Philippine Islands shut down and would eventually be destroyed during Allied bombing. The Japanese gathered many coins from circulation to melt down for imperial coinage. As hard money disappeared, the wartime economy increasingly relied on barter. Paper currency, including Japanese notes, guerrilla notes, and emergency scrip, circulated in the absence of coinage. The U.S. Congress and Treasury Department, along with the Philippine government, continued to gear up the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints for wartime production. Hundreds of millions of brass, copper, nickel, zinc, and silver Philippine coins were minted in the U.S. in 1944 and 1945, and transported by ship to the islands to aid commerce during and after liberation. So far, I've focused on Philippine coins as objects of material culture, as history you can hold in your hands, as they say. I personally believe that every collector of regular issue U.S. coins should own at least a typeset of 1 Philippine coin of each denomination. One of the most frequently asked questions in coin collecting is, how much is my coin worth? The flip side of that is, how much would I have to pay to build a nice collection? The answers boil down to supply and demand. On the demand side, interest in U.S. Philippine coins has been increasing over the past 15 years or so. The coins have been featured in the annual Guidebook of United States Coins, or Red Book, since the 1960s, which has brought them to the attention of millions of collectors. When I was publisher at Whitman Publishing, we dramatically increased our coverage of the coins and included them in the Bowers series books, the Cherry Picker's Guide, the 100 Greatest Modern World Coins, and other popular titles. The internet has enabled more people to learn about the coins, to buy, sell, and trade online, and to communicate easily with other collectors. Big auction firms like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries regularly offer the coins and maintain archives of their sales, including excellent photographs and historical context. Affinity groups like the Philippine Collectors Forum bring researchers, historians, and hobbyists together. All of this activity and attention tend to increase demand. Further increasing market demand, in recent years, wealthy collectors in the Philippines have been eagerly buying the coins, competing especially for rarities and high-grade pieces. Many rare coins have returned to the Philippines to reside in strongly held collections. Specialists seek out condition rarities, coins with unusually strong strikes and high grades. Die variety collectors have several rarities to look for. Again, all of this interest leads to heightened demand. This upward trend in demand has brought a general increase in prices for Philippine coins in recent years, especially for high-grade coins and rarities, but also for more common dates. On the supply side, many of the early silver coins were melted in the 1900s as the price of silver increased and their bullion value exceeded their face value. For example, an official report of June 10, 1911, said that of the silver pesos minted from 1903 to 1906, more than 90% had been melted or otherwise removed from the islands. Meanwhile, in 1942, the U.S. military dumped nearly 16 million silver pesos into Caballo Bay near Corregidor to keep them out of Japanese hands. Many millions were later recovered, but most of these have dark corrosion from prolonged submersion in the saltwater. This was a major blow to the supply of high-grade, visually attractive silver pesos. On the plus side, in terms of supply, the World War II production of Philippine coins in 1944 and 1945 was truly phenomenal. In 1944, the San Francisco Mint made some 19 million 50-centavo coins, or double its production of Liberty Walking half dollars. In 1945, the Denver Mint's production of 20 centavos was 111 million coins, almost equal to the year's output of Washington quarters for Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco combined. Centavos and 5 centavos too were minted in the tens of millions during the final years of the war. As a result, even mint state examples of many wartime coins can be bought for just a few dollars. There's no question that Filipino resistance to the Japanese invasion and guerrilla fighting to oppose the occupiers helped win the war for the Allies in the Pacific Theater. Filipino fighters led the way in liberating Allied prisoners from POW camps. If you're interested in learning more of the history of Filipino veterans of World War II, look up the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project. This group succeeded in getting Congress to pass the 2015 Filipino Veterans of World War II Congressional Gold Medal Act. This recognized the dedicated service of these veterans, sadly, long after many of them, like my grandfather-in-law, had passed away. Other resources, I mentioned the Philippine Collectors Forum. This is a group that meets every year at the ANA's World's Fair of Money. And if you go onto Facebook and probably Instagram and elsewhere, you will find many groups based in the Philippines, based in the United States, that are devoted to collectors of all sorts of memorabilia from the war years, including coins. The Filipino American National Historical Society is a group that you're welcome to join. It has chapters throughout the United States, and it has collections, galleries, archives, and a museum. It publishes books and other materials. It's very active. I'm a member myself. In fact, I'm a life member, and I belong to the Georgia chapter of that society. The American Numismatic Association, of course, is the largest collector organization in the United States. Its national headquarters is in Colorado Springs, and if you have anything to do with American coins and with U.S. Philippine coins, check out the ANA at www.money.org. The United States Mint is also a wonderful resource. It has information on a lot of the World War II related congressional gold medals and commemorative coins, photo libraries, and high resolution. That's at usmint.gov. And the Central Bank of the Philippines also has a website which has a lot of historical information that you can mine to learn more about these coins. I'll conclude with these thoughts. Why should I collect and study U.S. Philippine coins? Do it for their history, maybe for their connection to your own family's story, as tangible reminders of World War II, as beautiful little works of art, as important mementos of a long and colorful chapter in American numismatics, or as a reminder of the close ties and special relationship the United States has shared with the Philippines for more than 125 years. I collect them knowing that I'm a temporary caretaker of an important part of Filipino-American history. Ultimately, I collect them for my daughter and for her children. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions.
As Dan says, I applaud both of you for your persistent, interesting presentation. Dennis, thank you. Another excellent presentation, very informative. Dennis, do you have any thoughts on why the motto "In God We Trust" did not appear on the U.S. Philippine series while it was mandated by law for other U.S. coins?
That's a good question. I would have to do some more research into that. The design by Figueroa actually started for the peso started as un peso in Spanish. That was changed by Charles Barber, anglicized into 1 peso. So there was some flexibility in the wording of the inscriptions on the coins, even in that design process.
Another thank you for your presentation. Outstanding. And Robert says it was worth the wait. So yay, Dennis.
Thank you so much.
Is there any movement on rebuilding the Manila Mint?
None that I'm aware of. That would be wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of preservation of the history of World War II that happened, that is ongoing in Manila in particular. But the mint was sadly destroyed, along with, much of the Philippines' numismatic history toward the end of the war, in particular with the Allied bombing.
Okay. I'm going to wrap up, and if you have a question, go ahead and put it in, and then I will come back to it as soon as I'm done with the wrap up. So I just want to thank everybody for their patience. Thank you, Dennis, for sticking with it and getting us there. Our NumismaTalks are being recorded and will be available on our website once they're edited. Please be sure to check for future programs on our website at money.org, and you can click the education tab and find all of our NumismaTalks recordings there, along with what is coming in the future. So we do have another couple of questions. Let's see. Can you speak to the MacArthur person and MacArthur 50 centaurs? Sorry for my pronunciation. Coins of 1947.
Yes, so those are very popular among collectors of U.S. Philippine coins. It was a 50 centavos and a peso minted in silver to honor General MacArthur, but they were not minted under U.S. sovereignty. They were minted under the newly independent Philippines.
Can you comment on the history of the dumping of pesos in Manila Bay?
Oh gosh, that is a big topic. That would require a presentation of its own. Essentially, MacArthur and the Filipinos and American brass understood that the Japanese takeover was inevitable, and they made every effort they could to destroy, remove, or make inaccessible the Philippine treasury, which included millions of silver peso coins, gold bullion, paper currency, just to keep it out of Japanese hands. The Japanese, when they took over, did manage to use essentially slave labor to pull up a lot of a quantity of those coins from the bay. relatively few. And then after the war, there were efforts made to bring up millions more. So they're, as I mentioned, they're often seen with sea salt damage, and but they still have, great sentimental and historical value.
What about collecting paper money from the Philippines? Was a lot minted?
That's another huge topic. It is very collectible. There were guerrilla notes that were issued. There were municipal notes that were issued by different provinces, and there have been books written, uh, most recently by Neil Schaefer and Matthias Voigt, wrote an updated version of Schaefer's book on guerrilla currency. So yes, that's all very collectible and a rich, very rich topic and area of numismatics.
Great. That looks like all of our questions. So I just want to thank everybody again. Thank you, Dennis. And this will be up on our website in a bit. We're catching up, I think, on National Coin Week presentations. So, but you can keep an eye out for it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.